What's up? It's Willie McGinnis, three-time Super Bowl champion with the New England Patriots, and I'm hanging out with my man Chris Palme, okay? Chris does a podcast, 30 Minutes Live with CDP Podcast, every Wednesday and Friday night on Twitter, Facebook, and his YouTube channel. Make sure everybody tunes in, okay, to my man Chris Palme's podcast. Again, it's every Wednesday and Friday night on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. Make sure you guys check him out.
Hello, welcome all to 30 Minutes Live with CDP on this Wednesday, April 28th at 7 o'clock. I just want to say thank you guys all for tuning into my podcast again. And I have a special guest tonight, a longtime Canadian broadcaster and former morning host of the Fan 590, Don Landry. That's going to be on in just a minute, okay? I really appreciate him coming on tonight. And like I said, he's had a long career in broadcasting, and I'm looking forward to having Don on tonight. So just bear with me, guys. And you can check out his website at donlandry.com. And he's done a little bit of everything with radio, television, CFL, curling, public PA announcer for the Toronto Argonauts from 2013 to 2018. So just bear with me, guys, and I'm going to bring Don on right now. Hi, Don. How are you?
I'm good, Chris. How are you doing? Thanks for having me on. I hope the audio's okay. I've been hooking things up. I don't do as much podcasting, I don't think, as you do. So I think I've got everything going here properly, but you let me know if there are any problems.
No, I hear you loud and clear. Are you okay with my audio?
Very good. Yep.
Okay. Yeah. I've only been doing this podcasting a year ago. So, yeah, I got a taste of broadcasting a couple years ago with the Guelph Nighthawks, and then they liked my camera work, and I ended up with Rogers TV doing the Guelph Storm games on camera work there before the COVID shut down. And I've decided now I really enjoy doing this, and I'm going to try to make a career out of radio if I'm lucky enough to succeed in this.
That's excellent, Chris. That's a great story. I've known some people who, I started out on the air, but I know a lot of people who started out doing things, producing and doing things like that. And they would often say things to me like, I could do it as well as you can, Don. And then they would go on and do it. So good to see you on the other side and follow your dreams.
Well, and I always enjoyed your work over the years with the Fan 590. And you were with the late Pat Marsden and Gord Stellick. And I enjoyed your work as the Argos PA announcer too. You did that for 6 years as well.
I did. Thank you very much for that. All of it was really enjoyable. Everything that you've mentioned there. I was the PA announcer, since you have junior hockey experience. I was the PA announcer for the Barrie Colts for a couple of seasons too. That was back when Sheldon Keefe was playing for them, the Leafs head coach. So this is 99, 2000, somewhere in there. So I've had a chance to do not just the Argos, but the Barrie Colts as well, and really enjoyed doing that. And of course, all of those years of the Fan, 16 altogether, and 10 on the morning shows. So, all good memories.
You were one of the originals on the Fan, weren't you?
Not quite, but almost.
Okay.
Maybe a year and a bit after I started there part-time while I was still working. I'm trying to remember if I was still in Barrie at the time, because it was a very short period of time. I think I'd gone to London, right in that area. So that's 93. And I think the Fan went on the air. I don't know. 92? Do you know? Was it 92?
92,
so a year later or so, I did some part-time work while I was still mostly working in London. I was the sports director down there and did some stuff for the London Knights too. I got to do color commentary for a couple of seasons for the London Knights.
Wow.
I never got to do play-by-play, which I really wanted to try, but color commentary is fun too, because you can just basically sit there and watch the game until the whistle blows, and then as long as you have something to say, and then you can sit back and watch the game again after, right?
Yeah, I've had both the current Knights broadcasters on my podcast recently. I had Mike Stubbs, who's been their play-by-play guy on radio for the last 20 years, and then Jim Van Horn, who does color analyst.
Yeah.
Both super guys.
They are wonderful guys.
I could have talked to them for hours.
Yeah, wonderful guys. I remember when I was the sports director in London back in 93, 94, and Jim was at a rival station, and still, I remember him making me feel welcome, and we got together to talk a little bit. Friendly guy. And Mike Stubbs, I actually worked at the same radio station that he did in London back in 2013. I did a few months doing some talk radio there, and he was doing the nights there before they moved over to another radio station.
Yeah, to 980. Yeah.
Right.
I was going to say, and like I said, since I've been doing this podcast for the year, it took a while to finally get some guests on and stuff like that. But everyone that's come on here, from like John Murphy, the voice of the Bills, yourself, Mike Hogan. Mike Hogan was on here. Yeah, he was great. I talked to him for over an hour on here.
He's a good guy.
Really good guy. Everybody in your profession has really treated me like one of your own, and it just makes me want to continue to keep doing this and keep getting better at this.
Excellent. I'm glad to hear it.
So I really appreciate you coming on tonight as well. Okay, the next thing I was going to ask you about, I'll start are you okay time-wise? 40 minutes?
Oh, yeah, I'm
minutes?
fine.
You're okay? Okay. I always like to ask my guests and stuff like that. But what I was going to say, the one before I asked the questions, how did you and the other guys come behind the brains of the Chacin Cologne? I guess Gustavo. I can't pronounce his name, but
Chacin. Well, that's where it came from. Chris was when Gustavo Chacín was first called up by the Blue Jays, and I was doing the morning show with Gord Stellick at that point. We didn't know how to say his name. No one. We hadn't heard it, so we were. Was it Chacin? Chacin, how do you say that? And then we finally got the word. Oh, it's Chacin. And I think the first thing I thought of was, it sounds like a highbrow men's cologne. Ha ha ha! Isn't that funny? And you move on from there. But then we had the habit. Jeff Samet, the technical director and the producer on the show, he did a lot of comedy bits too. He and I had this habit, and Gord was the same way too, I think, where, if you got onto something, maybe you weren't going to let it go. So I think over the next few days or so, we made fun of, Chacin sounding like a cologne. And then Jeff put together some fake commercials for Chacin Cologne. Well, and then somebody at Rival Cosmetics heard it, and the Blue Jays heard it. And I can't remember if it was the Jays or the cosmetics company. One of them said, we should actually make this. And then the other side said, yeah, well, let's do that. And then they came to us and said, you want to be a part of this? And we said, of course. So they ended up giving away 10,000 little vials of Chacin Cologne. I wish I had the bottle with it. I had it in the other room, oddly enough, because I was taking a picture of it for Twitter because Jeff had brought it up the other day. So we gave away about like 10,000 of these little vials and cards with Gustavo Chacín on them. They made some commercials for it. That sort of thing. It was a blast. That was a lot of fun. That was one of the highlights, I think, of my entire time at the Fan doing the morning show. It was so much fun. We got to go to the game. Didn't throw out the first pitch that night or anything, but we got to go down on the field and, wave around. Hey, we invented the cologne.
I think it
was good.
I think that was 2004, I believe.
That sounds about right. Or 5.
Wow, that's hard to believe it was that long ago.
Yeah.
Wow. So, before I start asking you some questions, Don, can I just play a little clip with the Toronto Argonauts behind the scenes?
Sure.
Just it's a 3-minute clip of when you were becoming their PA announcer back then, just so people can see some of the scenes behind what you do as a public address announcer. Is that okay?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I'll just say the clip is courtesy of the Toronto Argonauts Football Club. Just 1 second. I'll put it right on. I'm still getting used to all this technology. Can you hear it okay?
I can.
Okay. Yeah, it's just behind the scenes.
Or in-stadium announcer, I guess some people call it. And I'm the guy that fans hear during the game saying,
Matt Black, 39. Number 39, Matt Black with the sack. Third down, Montreal.
I do the football end of the public address stuff, not to be confused with Strizzy, who's the on-field host who's fantastic and gets the crowd whipped into frenzies and runs all the contests and things like that. Well, I show up 3 hours before kickoff, so for a 7:30 game, we'll be in at 4:30, and there's a production meeting for the whole crew, the whole game crew, led by Kerry Hillier, who's fantastic at the job and coordinates everything that fans are going to see out there on the field, outside of the football, of course, but all of the entertainment things. We go through the scripts. That takes us a good 20
20, 25 minutes, sometimes about a half an hour. When we get that done, everybody has an idea of what's expected from them for that night, if there are any changes from the previous game. And then after that, I have actually an awful lot of time before kickoff. I don't really actually spring into action until about 20 minutes before kickoff. The gentleman beside me, his name is Tom Caligari, and he is an incredible spotter, and I need him. He's my second set of eyes, and he is, I don't know if he's the best in the league, but I can't imagine anyone being better at his job. He takes the binoculars. We're both watching the play. Obviously, sometimes I'll pick out who the pass was complete to and maybe even who made the tackle. But if I can't, he will. He'll confirm it. He'll quickly yell out the numbers, reception number 2, tackle by number 48. And then I quickly turn on the microphone and complete those thoughts or verbalize those thoughts for the fans in the stands so they know exactly what happened. Take a look at the ribbon board or the down and distance markers, do some quick calculations and figure out if it's 2nd and 7 or 2nd and 6, that sort of thing. Watch for other things like, has a flag been thrown on the play? Announce that. Keep people up to date on who might be injured if we can spot the number of the injured player. And Tom's part of all of that. It'd be a very difficult job to do by myself. I'd been approached about it, in the past, and I always said the same thing. No, I like sitting in my seats and having a couple of beers and just being a fan. And then I got pressed into action in the playoff game last year in a pinch, and I said, sure, I'll do it. And I had such a blast up here. Basically, I'm still allowed to be a fan. I'm up here, I'm watching the game. They want me to be enthused about what the Argos have done, which is easy for me to do. I can remember during that playoff game against Edmonton, there was a great play. I think it was Chad Owens, might even have been, the punt return for the touchdown. And I just sat up here and I just went, oh, what a play. That was fantastic. That was excellent. And Tom said, you're going to call it out? And I go, oh, yeah. And I hit the microphone and said, Chad Owens with the touchdown run. So it's a blast. It has really added to my experience of watching Argo football. I love it.
First down, Argo!
Anyways, Don, I just thought I would play this clip just because people don't get to see behind the scenes. I think that's great that the Argos did that.
Yeah, it was. So I guess that was back in about 2013, I think. Yeah. And I did it for 6 years, I guess.
Yes.
It's funny when I hear myself say that, I never wanted to do it because I'd been approached before and I just wanted to stay in the stands. And that's kind of why I left after 6 years. I was still having a lot of fun doing it. But it had been so long since I just sat in the stands and had a beer and watched football without having to do anything. And I decided that I wanted to do that. And I thought maybe it was time for another voice anyway. So I said, sayonara, and moved on.
I was going to say, because fans identify with the public address and announcer of their teams. Like, I know with the Philadelphia Phillies, Dan Baker's been doing their games since 1972. And you yourself did it for the Argos for 6 years. And then John Mason does the Pistons. It's just fans. You guys, to me, the PA guys I think it's just as important as the radio and TV guys, because you're the voice of the franchise when you come to a game too.
I always took great pride in doing it. I always enjoyed doing it and loved talking to fans after the game too. And finding out that there was maybe a moment that they really enjoyed when it came to the PA. But, obviously they were mostly talking about things that happened in the game. But it was always nice if you could stick out for the right reasons. Once in a while, you'd make a mistake or something, and then you'd hear about that over beers after the game. And that wasn't so great. But it was such a wonderful time. I'm so grateful that the Argos decided to hire me for that and keep me on for so many seasons because I really did enjoy it.
Yeah, and unfortunately, my last Argos game was Ricky Ray's last game in the 2018 season opener when they played Calgary at BMO Field. Ray had that brutal hit, and that kind of ended his career and stuff. And the rest of the season just went downhill from there.
Yeah. Absolutely. It's not been good since. Well, it was very good in 2017. And then after that, it fell apart. And then not so great again the year after. And then no 2020. That's worse. I mean, what would you rather have? No season or a terrible season?
Terrible season.
Of course. And so we all hope that the CFL is going to get back on the field. Their plan is to do it August the 5th.
August 5th, yep.
If everything works out, if they can get the proper go-aheads from different public health offices, and if they're allowed to have people in the stands, that's the important thing. Whether they can have, it's not likely they're going to be able to get 100% capacity, but they have to be able to get some people in the stands. If they're not allowed to, then I'm afraid we might be looking at a second canceled season. Now, I don't want anyone to be to misjudge what I just said there. I'm not saying I think we're going to have one. I hope we don't. I hope, we get to see our football league once again, but a lot of things have to come into place in time for this to happen.
Well, I know the OHL, they just couldn't play this year. So I'm hoping the OHL maybe in August can do training camp if they can get everyone vaccinated and the numbers come down. And I know the Canadian League Basketball League, where I was a volunteer with the Guelph Nighthawks, they pushed their season back until the end of June, beginning of July. So it's just going to depend. I think a lot of things are going to depend in the next month, in the next 4 or 5 weeks, what happens with all the numbers.
Yeah. We're in a critical situation right now. It's lasted longer than many of us thought. I mean, I didn't really think, did you, Chris, that it was going to be over in a few months? But no. I was certainly hoping as we turned into this new year that by the spring things were going to be not completely back to normal, but we'd see, the light at the end of the tunnel. And so it's been pretty disappointing to backslide the way we have.
And I don't think the Blue Jays are going to be in Toronto this summer either. Yeah. I think they're going to end up in Buffalo. So, but you know what? I still like what the CFL did. At least they've given people a little bit of hope, and they've kind of said, yeah, we're going to try to start up August 5th and that. So, like I said, we'll just have to cross our fingers on that.
Absolutely.
The one question I would like to, one day, if I can talk to Pinball Clements on here, is the U.S. import rule. How are they going to get some of these American players over even in July and August if there is a CFL season?
Well, you've got to do the protocols, right? I mean, in the other world that I cover quite a bit, curling, they've managed to do it pretty well. But although that's a bubble situation, not traveling around the way the NHL had a bubble last year. So you can do it. You need to hold tight to protocols. You have to be able to separate people who are infected from those who aren't. And that's just happened, by the way, in the curling bubble. The World Curling, the Women's Championship is about to get underway. And last weekend, they had a couple of players who came in from Germany who tested positive. And so they had to kind of put the brakes on everything. And it was only earlier today that they announced we're going ahead with the competition. They've been quarantined. We've separated everybody out. All the other testing looks good. So that's the kind of thing that you have to go through, whether you're talking about somebody who's in Canada and traveling from Halifax to Toronto to play for the Argos, or from Hamilton to Calgary to play for the Stampeders, or you're talking about somebody from Mississippi or California, wherever they're coming from. You just have to follow these protocols and keep everybody as healthy as you can.
One thing the CFL has going in its favor is there's no American-based team, so they don't need to worry about traveling out of Canada. So just get these guys here and get them to do all the quarantining and having. Do you think there will be a bubble? Like they'll have 2 cities that'll do it, or do you think the CFL is going to try to play in all their stadiums?
I think that's what they're aiming to do. I haven't heard much talk about them bubbling. I did last year. You'll probably recall, Chris, that they were talking about maybe going to Winnipeg. At the time, things might have been pretty good there, or as good as possibly could be. But I think the plan so far this year is they're going to try and have games in all of the different stadiums because, again, it's super important for Canadian Football League teams to get butts in seats because that's where a lot of the revenue is derived from.
Yep.
So I think that's the plan. And so that makes it a little bit more difficult. Because then you're talking about 9 different jurisdictions or municipal jurisdictions and then the provinces on top of it. Okay.
I'm going to start with some questions. Is that okay, Don?
Yep.
Just let me know if you're short on time or whatever.
I'm fine. I got I was going to say all night.
Okay.
Maybe not all night, Chris.
No.
Take your time.
Okay, no problem. First question is just for my audience. Can you just tell them a little bit about yourself and how you got into broadcasting?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how far back you want me to go. I remember as a kid, I used to play with my dad's reel-to-reel machine and pretend I was a DJ. So I think I knew from an early age on some level that I wanted to be a broadcaster because I would pretend, I would play music and pretend I was one of the hip jocks from CKOC or 1050 Chum or something like that. And then when I went through high school, I was accepted to University of Toronto for poli-sci, but I'd also applied to Humber for radio, and it came simply, because I think it was kind of in my DNA. I went, I want to do this. This seems like a lot more fun. So I went to Humber College, ended up doing music radio in Barrie for a while. And then, as I mentioned earlier, I ended up in London to be the sports director there, and then hosted a morning show for a short period of time there while I was part-time at the Fan. It's funny, you mentioned Mike Hogan, and he and I worked together in Ottawa in 1988. That's
Wow.
where we first met. And then he came to Barrie while I was there, and then ended up at the Fan. He might have been an original guy. We're very close. And then he introduced me to Scott Metcalf, who was the news and sports director there at the time. And that's where I got some part-time shifts. And then when it ended in London, I continued part-time, and then just kind of slowly but surely made my way into full-time status in 1996. And then in 2000, that's when I became the morning show host along with Pat Marsden, and stayed there until 2010.
I was going to say, you answered my next two questions. So, no, that's good. Because
that's a good guest, isn't it?
Yeah, no, that's good. I was going to say, my next one was your first radio job, which you already answered. Did you have, Don, did you have a mentor or mentors when you first broke into the industry, the business?
I did. I had a few. And, Jeff Walther was the program director at CKBB Radio in Barrie at the time. And to this day is the most important person in my career, because early on he really brought me along and helped me and molded me and gave me, not to get too into it, but he gave me a few chances, because as a young guy, I was I would say I was a little misguided in some ways in that, but Jeff saw something in me and he decided that he was just going to keep at me. And so he was really important. There was a guy at Chum at the time who I listened to all the time. His name was Bob McGee. I went on to kind of share the same hallways with him when he was at CHFI and I was at the Fan, which was outstanding to me, because out of the blue, I'd sent him a tape and a letter and just said, I really admire you. Could you just tell me if I'm going in the right direction? And he said, come on down to Toronto and have lunch. And every time I got in touch with him after that, he was always very supportive. He listened to my tapes. He said, here's where I think you can improve. I don't know why you did that. I really like this. He was excellent in the early going too. So those were two that are two that pop right away. And I've had a few more along the way. I don't know if this is going to be a question for later. Did I have mentors later on at the Fan? Nelson Millman, though, was exceptionally important to me and one of the most important people in my career, because at a time when I was doing some sports casting and some evening hosting, he was a guy who, for whatever reason, said, I see something in Don. And I think this is a guy that I want to move up and up and up and up. And he did. He was terrific to me.
I just wish they had all this technology years ago, because like I said, this has given me a platform to try to get into what I want to do. And I just wish they had this technology years ago.
Oh yeah. That would have been it was different. It was, when I started out, I had to put my demo tapes on reel to reel. I mean, now you can record this and you can send a link, right? Well, I'd have to get the reel. I'd have to physically mark it and cut it with a razor blade and put, I don't know. You're too young probably to remember any of that stuff or know it, but
I'm almost 49.
Yeah, so you know what? If you'd gone to Humber College, well, you're about 8 years younger than me, 7 years younger. Yeah. So they may have by that time gotten somewhat electronic, but it was not easy. And I remember, and then the postage costs too, Chris. You'd have to actually physically put this together, type up the letters, put it in envelopes, go down to the post office. I'd send 30 or 40 tapes out at the same time. But the first batch I sent out, I only got one response, and it was from the aforementioned Jeff Walther in Barrie. So luckily it worked out. But for that one acceptance where he said, come on up and we'll have a talk, there were 34 or 40 rejections that I didn't even get an answer to. And that's that's not an original story. That's one that has happened to almost everybody in any walk of life. I think is you just have to persist, right?
Yes, and that's what I'm going to do. And I know because of my age, it's going to be a strike against me, but I'm lucky to have this platform. And I have this on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, and then I even have my podcast now on Apple's iTunes and Spotify and radio. I have 12 different platforms. So
Wow.
I'm just hoping if I keep doing this and keep trying to improve, and to me, the guests make a podcast. So I've been very lucky to get guys like you and Mike Hogan and John Murphy and Bob Sochi and Freddie Coleman from ESPN. So I'm just hoping one day I have that opportunity.
I hope so too. And this is the first time I've ever been interviewed by you. But I have to say, you've got, if I may, you've got a good manner. You're friendly. You're asking good questions. You're obviously thoroughly prepared. You're doing really well. So just keep your stick on the ice and keep driving the net, Chris.
Okay, well, thank you. And StreamYard, which I use here, is great too because it puts all my questions and all my stats on here, so I don't have to look at a piece of paper and it kind of can ignore my guests either. So I was going to say my next question for you, Don, is what was it like being hired by the Fan 590 and being part of that morning show with one of my favorites, the late great Pat Marsden and Gord Stellick?
Well, being hired at the Fan, it was I guess the people use the phrase "dream come true." I don't. It is in a way. I've always been a big sports fan, huge sports fan. And when I was starting out in radio, the most sports you could do would be a sportscaster. There was no sports radio. Don't have a talk show and talk about sports all the time. So that wouldn't even have dawned on me. So when it did happen and I was making my way and I was the sports director in London, I thought, oh my goodness, this is where I got to be. I got to go there. I need to be there. And luckily things fell into place and I was able to do it. So it was sensational to get hired there, to work for some wonderful people like, as I mentioned, Scott Metcalf and Nelson Millman and all of the rest of them. And then the funny thing is I was doing the sports casting for the morning show when John Derringer was co-hosting with Pat Marsden. And the true story is I was preparing the 9 a.m. sports cast. I was out in the newsroom and I was typing away and John had just signed off. And there's a tap on my shoulder as I'm getting ready. I turn around and there's John. He goes, I just want to tell you, it's been a real slice. I went upstairs and quit, and that's it for me. Take care of yourself. And he walked out. And I'm like, what? And about, 30 seconds later, Nelson Millman walks in and says, you're on tomorrow. And I was the fill-in host with Pat Marsden for a good, I want to say 2 or 3 months before they made a decision. And then luckily, Pat, the wily old vet, had decided that, I think I can work with this guy. I think he's fine. All right, what the hell? We could do worse. And so he decided to take me under his wing and allow me to be his co-host. And it was something working with Pat Marsden because he was a legend, remains a legend, even, may he rest in peace. But by that time, he was already a legend doing his sportscasts on CFTO. And as a CFL fan, I just loved the way he called football games. So I was in awe going in there. And he treated me like I was his punching bag because that's what Pat Marsden did. And he taught me a lot of lessons, had us laughing all the time. And then when Gord came along, it was kind of, we didn't beat each other up. Pat and I had this little, we're going to fist fight on the air kind of thing for fun. And Gord and I just kind of sat back in our chairs and just, relaxed and had, I think, a different kind of show. But Gord was always very fast with the quips and with the one-liners, great sense of humor. And so that worked well with me as Pat's had. So very different people on the air and in person, but terrific to work with.
I was going to say, and I always grew up in the 70s as a radio guy, and I always like listening to stations. And before the Fan 590 in Toronto came, I always used to listen to at night the Fan 660 in New York, the WFAN.
Right.
That was one of the original sports stations. And then I was kind of glad that you guys, Toronto got one in 92, 93. The timing was good because the Blue Jays were a World Series team back then, too.
It's an amazing thing, too, and it has a bit of an Argos tie to it maybe you already know this, Chris, because they had been doing some sports on CJCL, and then the Rocket Ishmael signing happened with the Argos 30 years ago.
1991. 1991.
Yeah.
Hard to believe.
So it's 30 years ago, I think this week or last week. And they did a lot of coverage on that. And I think that's when people at the station started to go, they do this kind of thing in the States all the time. Why wouldn't we do this in Toronto? And that played a pretty big role, I think, in greasing the wheels, the axles, to get sports radio on in Toronto.
I was going to say, I was just kind of disappointed about TSN 1150 in Hamilton being going, because right now it's really TSN, and I guess TSN's kind of downsized too. But to me, I think radio still has a place in the market. To me,
well, it does, but in what form? Because this is kind of television, since there's a visual in that. But podcasting is a form of radio, if you will. Things are always fluid and they change, and I don't know what the future is, but I know that people still right now love to be able to be driving along in their car and flipping on the radio station and hearing it. And I think people enjoy hearing local personalities and broadcasters still, as opposed to, cherry picking podcasts from Los Angeles or, wherever they might be doing it. So, for the foreseeable future, radio will still have a hold. And as long as the numbers remain decent, then you'll have radio stations, but you're going to dovetail more and more the numbers of listeners, traditionally listening on their car radios or their radios in their kitchen or wherever, and those who are streaming it. And that's for both radio and television. As long as those numbers merge, everything's fine. But once, say, if it were to happen, the streaming numbers overtake by a wide margin the numbers that you have on terrestrial radio, then I think you're going to see at that point things will shift completely to the internet. But I don't know when that comes, or even if it does, if it's in the near future or somewhere far down the road.
I was going to say, and as for the Blue Jays, I like Dan Shulman, I like Buck Martinez, Pat Tabler, but I really hope in the next year Rogers considers bringing back Ben Wagner, because to me, I really like to see the Blue. I'm not a Blue Jays fan, I'm a Tigers fan, but to me, it's I think you need a radio team, and I'm not a big fan of the simulcasting. No. I know the Sabres do it as well, but I kind of like fans to have a choice of radio guys, TV guys, and to me, Ben Wagner, I think, is one of the better young broadcasters in Major League Baseball.
And I think, and you're right, Chris, in that, you have to have these separate entities when it comes to radio and TV, particularly for baseball, because, well, you're a Tigers fan. You know about Ernie Harwell.
Oh, and Paul Carey,
how wonderful, evocative, and rich those broadcasts were. And Toronto Blue Jay fans know with Tom Cheek and Jerry Howarth, just how different that is. And as good as Dan Shulman is, if there's anybody who can make it work, it's Dan Shulman.
I agree. I agree.
He's so good. But even I would suggest, if you asked him, he'd say, I would prefer to do one or the other, and that the product is deserving of that. And Blue Jay fans are deserving of having a separate radio broadcast if that's what they need at certain times when they can't be in front of a TV or don't want to be or can't be streaming the actual visuals of it. So I think it was a bad mistake to do that, and I hope they change course and get back to having a radio broadcast.
Keep our fingers crossed too. And the Tigers' current guys I really like too: Dan Dickerson and Jim Price on the 97 won the ticket. Jim Price has been there years now, and Dan Dickerson took over for Ernie Harwell, and I'm hoping one day to get him on here because I really enjoy how he does the game. The radio guys have to paint a picture more than the TV guys, and from what I've seen.
Oh, that's absolutely correct. And it's the same with hockey in some ways too. Although what I think you could do is get away with a radio style hockey broadcast on TV if you really wanted to. But baseball's always had, has been very different from the other sports for some reason in that. And I'm not sure, maybe Chris, it's because the broadcasters brought us up to feel that. They they knew they had to describe what was happening, how big the lead the runner was taking, how it looks when the pitcher is taking his cap off and mopping his brow, and what it might mean because you can't see it. So we got used to that. And so it's hard to part with that, because decades and decades and decades of us, for guys like us, hearing it since we were babies, since we were born, and even our fathers and mothers would have had the same kind of experience hearing baseball on radio for so many years.
Well, I grew up as an Argo fan in the late 70s, early 80s, when the team wasn't very good. Most of the games were blacked out because of the rule back then, and I had to listen to the games on CFRB 1010 with Bob Bratina, the former mayor of Hamilton, and Pete Martin, and that's how I got my love for the Argos, is through the Bob Bratina and Pete Martin for those
Bob
many
Bratina
years.
Was a fantastic play-by-play guy, and he did both.
Yes.
He did the Ticats too for a while, but I remember actually Dave Hodge was doing it a little before. So I predate Bob Bratina a little bit, but Bob Bratina was the play-by-play guy, if I'm not mistaken, Chris, as the Argos turned from jokes to Grey Cup contenders and champions, right, in the early 80s.
Yes.
Because I remember listening to him when I couldn't be in front of a TV set when I was at work. And there have been just so many great radio play-by-play broadcasters in every sport in my lifetime, in Toronto and around Toronto. Yes. I think we've been pretty blessed.
Yeah, and I was going to say, and then Mike Hogan's done the Argos since 2011, I believe, or 2010.
Hoagie is another one who, and he has been a football fanatic as long as I've known him. Well, beyond that, and his love for the Argos is clear, and it is on high volume constantly. And he has this great. I was going to say it's a knack. It's a talent for ensuring that energy comes through at appropriate times and building moments. I shouldn't say stuff like that in case it gets back to him. I don't need him getting the big head, right? But nobody loves Canadian football and the Argos like Mike Hogan, and it shows every broadcast.
Definitely. My next question for you, Don, is favorite athlete or athletes you've interviewed over the years, and favorite radio TV personalities you've been able to work with over the years as well, if you have a couple.
Yeah, well, let's start with the personalities. I mean, we talked about, Pat and Gord, and I worked with a man by the name of Colin Boughton in London when I was there doing the morning show. His nickname is CB, and we were CB and Landry, the Breakfast Flakes. I had a riot working with him. I've always had a lot of fun whenever, when I was with Pat, when I was with Gord, when they would go on vacation, and I was asked the question, who would you like to fill in? I'd say Vic Rauter. And every time he came in, we just had such a great time. And we ended up being really good friends out of it. And he was another guy that I'd watched on TV before I got to know him and thought, oh my goodness, I'm working with Vic Rauter. But so funny. It's just so easy for us to get along and talk with each other on the radio. So he's another one that I absolutely love to work with. When it comes to favorite people to interview, some of them are one-offs. One time, Chris, we had in the studio at the same time George Chuvalo and George Foreman. Wow. I mean, that was just an incredible moment for me to talk boxing with these two icons. And I'm not even a huge boxing fan. I don't mind it. But these guys were giants. And to have them in the studio at the same time, I don't even remember if I asked questions, to tell you the truth, or if we just listened to them talk to each other. But it was terrific. It was always nice to talk to Pinball Clemens, and remains, so you know why. The energy, the warmth, fantastic guest to talk to. Oddly enough, and people who remember the show might be surprised by this, but it's actually true. Sam Mitchell, the head coach of the Raptors, who we had a terrible relationship with him, Gord and I, at the beginning. But it turned into one of the more memorable weekly segments I'd ever done in radio, and grew to love it and look forward to it. He didn't want to be on the air with us. He didn't know who we were. We were this far from saying, let's just not have this guy on anymore. And we were going to approach the Raptors and say, that's it. But because we'd had a particularly bad Wednesday morning conversation with him. And apparently somebody at the Raptors had heard it and gone to Sam and said, what are you doing? Why are you so hard to get along with? It's just Gord and Don. They're just asking questions. They're not out to get you. And, you're ticking them off. So we were told, hey, have him on again next week, see how it goes. And we had him on the next week, and we welcomed him. And Gord and I were looking at each other like, what's going to happen? And the first thing Sam said was, I hear you all need a hug. And it kind of turned from there. And then it became he was beating up on us, but it was fun. And we would give him the gears, and he would give it right back to us. That was a lot of fun. Sam Weish, the
late Sam Weish. Yeah.
He was so wonderful to have on as our NFL insider. I loved talking to that guy every week because he was so smart, could explain things in tremendous but simplistic detail so you could get them. And he was funny as heck too. So those are a few that come to mind for me.
Okay. I was going to say, my next question I was going to ask you, can you just tell my audience what you're currently doing with your curling coverage, the CFL, and I guess with the Argonauts, and your favorite all-time Argos game you witnessed at BMO Field so far?
Okay. Well, let's see. My curling coverage, there's a few of my things have been found on the Curling News, SI. I've done a little less this year than I had in the past, but I still do some writing for Curling Canada once in a while. And before COVID, I was actually doing play-by-play on Sportsnet for the Alberta Men's and Women's Championships every year. And that's been another great highlight of my career to do that since 2013. With the CFL, I'm an occasional columnist there. When there's a season, I would do a couple of columns a week. In the last year or so, it's been fewer, but once in a while they reach out to me and say we could use a column on something. I got to write about Marv Levy a couple of weeks ago, and that was a lot of fun. So that's what I've been going or what I've been doing with them. With the Argos, nothing right now. Not since I left the PA job. I would love to write for them, give them more content, and hopefully somewhere down the road I'll be able to do that. All-time favorite game at BMO Field, right? Well, we only have since what, 2016?
Yeah.
Oh, and it's Argos game, because I was going to say the 2016 Grey Cup, which was
I was at that game. I was at that game, yes.
It was sensational. Overtime, the Ottawa Red Blacks win. But since you say Argos game, oh boy. The 2017 Eastern Final.
Against Saskatchewan, I believe.
Absolutely. The Argos had a lead. The defense was playing great. Saskatchewan came back, took the lead, and then Ricky Ray marched them downfield, had a third and I want to say 6 or 7. Do you remember, Chris, when they converted?
There
James
was a big
Weiler, he completed the pass, and then they got the touchdown, and they were on to the Grey Cup. So I would say that one is probably the most memorable. And all the time they came back from, 28-0 down or something to Winnipeg and beat them? Do you remember that one?
Just not sure if it was 28-0 or not, but I know there was that year. That year, the Argos were a nice surprise because they came out of nowhere to win that Grey Cup because they weren't even favored. Yeah, because Calgary was favored to win that Grey Cup, and it just shows you the game's still played on the field, not on paper.
Yep.
And that's the thing I love about the CFL. There's been many years where the Argos were supposed to win the Grey Cup and they got beat in the Eastern Final. I still think the 88 Argos team should have won the Grey Cup that year, but they ran into a red-hot Winnipeg team in the last ever game at Exhibition Stadium, and it just shows you what you do in the regular season doesn't translate into the playoffs all the time.
Turnabout is fair play too, right, Chris? Because in 1987, the Argos went into Winnipeg and beat them, I think, 19-3 and got
Winnipeg.
the Grey Cup game. And you're right. The next year they ended up 14-4, and were in first place.
Yep.
And Winnipeg marched into Toronto. The funny thing about that game for me is I was in Ottawa at the time, and I was the Ottawa Rough Riders reporter. One of the things that I did, and had the Argos won that game against Winnipeg, and the Grey Cup was in Ottawa, I was not going to get to cover it because Bill Stevenson was going to come from CFRB to cover the Argos. When they lost, the bosses in Toronto said, we're not sending anybody. Who's there? And I got to cover my first ever Grey Cup game because the Argos lost to Winnipeg that year. And it was a tremendous experience. And the first one of, 13, 14, or 15 that I've covered now so far.
Wow, that's a lot. That's definitely a lot. I had Damon Allen on a couple weeks ago, and I bugged Damon. I'm like, you're the last quarterback to beat the Argos in a Grey Cup. And he's like, really? And I'm like, yeah, 1987. Because the Argos have won their last 6 Grey Cup appearances.
It's true. And he wasn't even the starter, right?
Yeah, he came in as a backup. Yeah. Gunnikin got hurt in that game.
That's right. He was knocked out by namesake Tank Landry, or was it Glenn Kulka? Might have been Glenn Kulka.
Glenn Kulka.
Could have been.
Remember Tank Landry, Doug Landry.
Yeah.
The Tank. Yeah, he was. And then he had Willie Plus on that team. I really thought the Argos should have won more than one Grey Cup in the 80s, though.
Oh, yeah. Really good teams. That team absolutely should have won the Grey Cup that year. You are correct. But Winnipeg had a formidable team. And remember, what they had was an exceptionally good head coach, Mike Riley.
Oh, yes.
He was tremendous and would win a Grey Cup with them in 88 and then also in 90 before he headed back south. So, but that was another weird decade for the Argos, wasn't it? They were terrible at the beginning. Then they were great. Then they were terrible. Then they
at
were
the end.
Great.
Yes. But I'm hoping with Penball Clements as president, and they got John Murphy, I guess, is their player personnel guy. And they also have a new head coach, Dinwiddie, I think. Yep. Ryan Dinwiddie. And then Correct. They got, and their roster is basically, Mike Hogan was telling me this, 90% approximately changed over from 2 years ago.
Well, they made a lot of moves in free agency last year in preparation for the season that was not to be. Then they made even more this offseason. So I wouldn't be surprised if Mike's right with that 90% figure. And they'll hope that the young quarterback, Nick Arbuckle, is what he appears to be, what he appeared to be when he was with Calgary a couple of years ago. And he got to play when Bo Levi Mitchell got injured. We haven't seen him play an awful lot, but he sure looks like the real deal. And we'll see if the Argos have their quarterback of the present and the future. And beyond that, yeah, they've got many new faces on the defense. They've got particularly defensive line, linebacking, lots of receivers. They took great pains to add Toronto area athletes where they could in the last couple of years too. And I guess the reason for that is they want more talk about the team in Toronto, but also when you get athletes who are from the area, maybe they dial in just a little bit more too. I think maybe that's what they're thinking too.
Because I know the Argos had Matt Nichols, but obviously they really wanted the Arbuckle out of Calgary. I guess he fit their system better.
I think so, because Ryan Dinwiddie, of course, worked with Arbuckle in Calgary.
Yeah.
When Dinwiddie becomes the Argos head coach, I think they really had their eye on him then, 2 years ago. And then Arbuckle got traded to Ottawa. Then they ended up with Matt Nichols. And, then the year doesn't happen, and they kind of swapped quarterbacks. And I think that's the way the Argos would have had it in the first place. And Matt Nichols going to Ottawa, where Paul LaPolice is the head coach. He'd worked with him a lot in Winnipeg. I think it kind of worked out for both teams.
Definitely. One question I was going to ask you, the CFL is going to try a 14-game schedule. Do you think they'll even try to play one preseason game for each team? Or do you think it'll just go right into football like the NFL did last year without a preseason?
Is that what the NFL did? I'd forgotten that. They didn't play any preseason games at all?
Nope.
Well, then it's been done, and it can be done. So I would suppose, depending on how squished the timeline's going to be, they might just step right into a regular season game because, time is your enemy. So, yeah, I could see them doing that then.
Yeah, I definitely think if there's going to be a season, it'll have to start August 5th. I can't see them waiting to September or October to start. So
it would be tough because, they still have to have the Grey Cup in December, which is already, I guess, the plan, December 12th in Hamilton.
Yeah.
Get underway August the 5th. But I think as a fan, I don't know. You tell me. If they came to me in the summer and said, okay, we can't do this thing now, but we could play 9 games, I'd say sign me up, Chris, because I just want to see the CFL. I'd say that's fine. I don't care about asterisks You know, if other people go, wow, it's not a real championship, they didn't play the full, fine, you put an asterisk on it. I want to see the games and the Grey Cup if I possibly can.
Definitely. Yeah, I would say between 9 and 14 games would be perfect as well. So, yeah, you've answered my last two questions. What challenges does the CFL face in 2021 and beyond? Obviously, we've already talked about that. And then the Toronto Argonauts 21. I do think for the Argos, in their case, one preseason game might be good because there's been so much change and turnover. It might be a beneficiary to the Argos, especially to have at least one preseason game. And that's just my opinion. In my opinion,
I think you're probably right in that with so many new pieces in place, a lot of great players, but who haven't played with each other. Even in a full season, it would have been safe to assume that the Argonauts would not have hit their stride until the midway point, you know. But I guess the great equalizer in all of this, Chris, now is that every other team now hasn't played for a while either. Now, yes, you'd have some teammates going back to teams that they were already on with other guys, so they'd know them from years before, and that would give them a little bit of an advantage, but it still might take them a little while to get all the gears meshing too.
Okay. Do you have like 2 more minutes? I was just going to talk to you briefly about the NFL draft, which takes place the April 29th to May 1st in Cleveland.
Right.
I was going to say, who do you think's going to go in the top 5, top 6? I have a couple of names I just put on here. I was going to get your thoughts on what do you think was going to happen in the top 5, top 6 picks.
Yeah, I don't know if I could go that far, because drafts are something that I kind of get into, on draft night. So, I think it's probably pretty safe to assume that Trevor Lawrence is going to be a Jacksonville Jaguar first overall. That's what we're hearing. And that, I guess if we're talking top 5, top 6 picks, it's like how many quarterbacks are going to go there? And like, are the first 3, 4 going to be quarterbacks? We'll see how that plays out. But beyond the number 1 overall guy, I can't really give you my impressions on who I think might come next, unless we were going to continue listing quarterbacks like Zach Wilson and go on from there. So, but it sounds like you've done some homework, so I'd love to hear
a little bit.
Hear what you've got to say about it.
A little bit. I do think the first 2 picks are going to be quarterbacks. Actually, the first 3. I think the first 3 because I think the Jets are in need of a quarterback, and the Niners. I believe, my opinion, they're going to take Mac Jones, and then they're going to end up trading Jimmy G to the Patriots.
Well, Jimmy G back to the Pats. All right.
Yep. And I believe the Patriots are going to make a couple of trades. I think they're going to get Jimmy G, and I also think they're going to get themselves a wide receiver as well. So we'll see. The Eagles had the number 6 pick, but the Eagles traded down to number 12, and the Eagles definitely need a wide receiver, but I don't know if they're going to get that one at number 12. So I'm hoping we can still get Patrick Surtain Jr., a cornerback. So we'll see what happens there.
Well, see, you've betrayed yourself, Chris, right? You said 2 or 3 times. So an Eagles fan, right? That's why you get along with Mike Hogan so well.
I shouldn't say we because I don't work for the Eagles, but I'm a huge Eagles fan. But it just shows you how hard it is to you win a Super Bowl, and then within 3 years, now they're in a rebuild. It just shows you, even if you're not a Patriots fan, what they did for that 20-year run, I don't think will ever be done again in football.
Hard to imagine it, but if it was hard to imagine it happening even in 2000. I know we had some dynasties here and there, but even the teams that won 2 or 3 in a row or 3 out of 5, they'd have some hard times too, So to be that consistently good for a couple of decades is ridiculous. And it's a perfect storm of the coach and the quarterback for starters, but so many other things have to go right with competent people in places everywhere in that front office. Yeah, you might, maybe in our lifetime, we don't see that again in the NFL. It's possible.
And myself and my friend Todd were at Brady's first NFL game on Monday, July 31st, 2000 in Canton, Ohio.
Is that right?
Yep, and it was Dennis Miller's first game in the booth on Monday Night Football with Al Michaels and I think Dan Fultz, I believe. And
That worked out well, didn't it?
yeah, and the Patriots quarterbacks were Bledsoe, John Freeze, the former Argo Michael Bishop, and this skinny kid from Michigan, 6th round, 199. And Brady came in later in that game, and I was like, "Who is this kid, man? He was impressive." And I still have the ticket stub from that game from 21 years ago.
I still remember, with Bledsoe getting injured, and then you remember when the Patriots won the Super Bowl with Brady at quarterback, and Bledsoe was healthy again, but Brady had taken off, and I just remember him grabbing Bledsoe by the shoulder, saying, "We won, we won!" And Bledsoe going, "Yeah, that's kind of great."
Yeah, so I was going to say, one other thing I wanted to ask you about, and then I got one more question for you. How did you get into impressions of Jerry Howarth, Don Cherry, Mike Tyson? Is that something you always did as a hobby, or?
Yeah, I think so. I think when I was a kid, I don't remember who I would have, tried to imitate or do impressions of first when I was a kid. Probably people like Johnny Carson, people that I saw on television and that sort of thing. I can't really give you a great answer on why or when, but at some point I guess I had fun doing it, and started to do it a bit in radio. I actually did a Jerry Howarth impression when I was in Barrie, when I was in my 20s, in the mid 80s, just for fun. And Vic Rauter, who I've talked about, who was actually dating my English teacher in high school. And I remember we got wind of that. And in the cafeteria, I would do a little Vic Rauter. "This is Vic on a date. How are you?" That sort of thing. And I think I built that from there. And the other ones just kind of came. I don't remember when I started doing Don Cherry, but it became something that was really valuable to me and something that I loved to do. And thankfully, he loved it as well. It's I don't know. I guess I was just always kind of trying to be a cut up in class or wherever I was when I was a kid, and it kind of just grew from there.
Okay. And my last question for you, do you have any advice to give to anyone, any advice to give to those wanting to pursue a career in radio, TV, media, not just myself, but others out there that maybe watch or listen to this podcast later?
I do. And I have a good answer and one that I've been asked this question before. And so I have a somewhat rehearsed answer, or one that I'm well prepared for, which is, I think the best advice is, two pieces of it. Try as hard as you can just to be yourself, which can sometimes be difficult, and you can sometimes forget about it because you want to be, here, I'll bring the name up again, Bob McGee, and that's who I wanted to be. But eventually I had to take what I loved about all of these different broadcasters and make it myself instead. So try to remember who you are, try to be who you are. The other thing is, just don't say no to things, within reason, which is, and what I mean by that is, you might go, well, I'm going to be a sportscaster and that's all I'm going to do. And then you have a gig somewhere and they say, oh, something happened at City Hall. We need someone to go down there. And you're like, well, I don't want to do news. Do it anyway, because two things. One, you might find another interest. You never know when you're going to find another interest. And the second thing is, probably should be the first thing, is the higher ups notice people who go, yeah, okay, I can help out with that. So I'd always say, try to say yes to things, even if you're not interested in them, just to see, just to satisfy your curiosity and to look like a good player, a good team player.
And be flexible too.
Yeah.
Okay. Like I said, Don, I really appreciate you coming on tonight. I'm hoping maybe in the future you might be able to come on again and talk a little more CFL. And I don't know a lot about curling, so maybe the next time you can come on, you can just maybe teach me a little more about curling and how the game works.
I would love to. And maybe I'll fix the lighting for next time too, Chris. This is not, as it gets darker outside, it's looking increasingly sinister here.
No, it's okay. I like the picture in the background. Nice horse, thoroughbred horse.
That's Northern Dancer, by the way. That's Northern Dancer winning the Kentucky Derby in 1964. And I do have a signature of the jockey up there, Bill Hartack. You can see maybe just back there.
Wow.
Yeah,
Yeah.
my good
on the
friend
right
Glenn
side.
Crowder and Sandy Hawley from Woodbine Entertainment years ago brought that in for me, and then they brought Bill Hartack in, and I said, "Could you please sign right here, please?" And he did.
I met Sandy Hawley once. Really a nice guy. Super nice guy.
Yep. He
Yep,
is. I
so-
used to have like a holy trinity of beautiful people in sports that I liked to talk to, and then Pinball Clemens, George Chavallo, and Johnny Bauer. Then I met Sandy Hawley, and I had to make it, a grand slam of great people in sports because
Definitely.
he's one of them.
Okay. Well, I'm going to let you go, Don, but I just want to say thank you so much for coming on 30 Minutes Live with CDP. And like I said, I'd love to have you come back on again and maybe teach me a little bit about the game of curling.
Absolutely, Chris. Anytime. I've really enjoyed this. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Don. You have a great night, and we'll keep in touch.
You too.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Anyways, I just want to say thanks to Don Landry for coming on tonight. You guys can check out his website, donlandry.com, and everything he's done in radio and television is on there. And like I said, he's had a long career in radio in the Toronto area and with the CFL and with the Argos as their PA announcer for 6 years. So I hope you guys all enjoyed the podcast tonight with Don Landry. And like I said, I'm working on more guests coming up. So before I head out, I'm just going to do comments section. And Mark Richardson, hi, Chris. And Mark Richardson, great guest. Hey, Mark, as always, thanks for coming on, buddy. Appreciate it. And everybody who watches this show, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And like I said, guys, I do have another show coming up on Friday night at 7 o'clock. This is going to be my second repeat guest. Give me 1 second. I'm just trying to find her picture on here. There she is. Okay, I'll put her on here now. So next 30 Minutes Live with CDP podcast is this Friday, April 28th at 7 o'clock Eastern, 4 on the Pacific time. I'm going to have Julie Bueller, former sports reporter and radio personality in California, and the host of Get Your Love On Pod and digital creator, come on here. And Julie's a huge NFL fan and San Francisco 49ers fan. And she came on in February, so she'll be coming again on this Friday night. So I hope you guys can tune in to the 30 Minutes Live with CDP podcast this Friday night at 7 o'clock with my guest, Julie Bueller, who's a second-time guest. And guys, just to let you know as well, I'm just going to take her picture off so you guys can see me. I am now on my podcasts. You guys know they're on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter Live. Well, my podcasts are now on RadioCast, Spotify, Anchor FM. And today, as of today, my audio version of my podcast will be on Apple iTunes. If you guys want to subscribe and listen to my podcasts on audio. So anyways, guys, like I said, I hope you enjoyed the podcast tonight with Don Landry. And I'm going to try to bring Don on again in the future and maybe talk to me a little bit more about curling, because I don't know that much about curling and that. So, yeah, I really enjoyed my guest tonight. So anyways, guys, and just a reminder, you got the NFL draft tomorrow night. It goes from Thursday, what's today? The 20th. Yeah, tomorrow night. It goes until, today's Wednesday. Yeah, sorry, I'm all mixed up on my time. So the NFL draft goes Thursday to this Saturday, and it's in Cleveland, Ohio. The Jacksonville Jaguars have the number 1 pick, most likely going to take Trevor Lawrence. The Jets, number 2 pick, are going to take probably another quarterback. San Francisco's get the number 3 pick. I'm predicting they're going to take Mac Jones, and then they're going to trade Jimmy G to the New England Patriots. I predict the Patriots are going to end up with Jimmy G, and they're also going to draft a wide receiver in the first round. We're going to see what happens there, but expect Bill Belichick and the Patriots to be active in moving up tomorrow and making a trade with the Niners. I know the Philadelphia Eagles, the Birds, we had the number 6 pick, but now we're in number 12. So we'll see what happens there. I'm hoping we can get Patrick Surtain, a cornerback, from Alabama, hopefully. We could use a receiver too, but I shouldn't say we, the Eagles. So I know the Eagles have 11 draft picks tomorrow night. So we'll just have to pray and hope that Howie Roseman and his scouting department draft wisely, because 11 picks is going to be critical into getting this Eagles team back to being a competitive team and back into the playoffs. So it should be interesting tomorrow night. And like I said here, I'll just put this on again. These are six top picks for the draft. Trevor Lawrence from Clemson, Sewell, an offensive tackle from Oregon, Kyle Pitts, a tight end from Florida, might go to Atlanta, Jalen Waddle, a wide receiver from Alabama, Justin Fields, a quarterback from Ohio State University, and Jamar Chase, a wide receiver from LSU. So we'll see what happens. It's going to be an interesting next 3 days with the NFL draft and that. So like I said, guys, I'm going to talk a little 49ers football with Julie Bueller on Friday night, and we'll talk about the NFL draft as well. So yeah, I'm looking forward to Friday night with Julie Bueller, and we'll talk some NFL as well. So anyways, guys, just want to say, hey, thanks again to Don Landry for coming on, and thank you all for watching 30 Minutes Live with CDP. If you watch this live or you watch it later, and look for my podcast now on Spotify, Apple's iTunes, and Anchor FM on here as well. We'll see you guys all Friday night, 7 o'clock Eastern, 4 on the West Coast, with special guest Julie Bueller. Have a good night, guys. We'll see you Friday night. Take care.